Mark is engaged in an intense training battle against a giant, exchanging powerful punches. After a grueling fight, the giant is defeated. Meanwhile, the parents of the giant are promised a cure for their son's condition. Following the battle, Mark is seen emerging from a volcano, completely unharmed by the extreme heat, showcasing his immense durability. He then quickly flies to space and returns to Earth in the blink of an eye. To top it off, Mark lifts a massive iceberg, signaling the extent of his growing strength. It appears that Mark is undergoing rigorous training under Cecil's guidance, aiming to become even stronger. Cecil and Donald have a conversation about the critical need for Mark to become stronger. Rex then enters the room, visibly surprised by the high-tech equipment that's specifically designed for Mark's training. As they're talking, an emergency arises. A robbery occurs, and both Rex and Mark quickly gear up to assist.
Maybe I should take Rex. Who knows how tough this could be? And there might be stuff that needs to be exploded.
Mark and Rex arrive at the crime scene and immediately engage in combat with a group of low-level criminals. During the fight, Rex asks Mark why he isn't dating Eve, to which Mark responds that it's complicated. Rex shares that he just wants Mark and Eve to be happy, showing a more supportive side to their relationship. However, the moment takes a darker turn when Multipole suddenly appears out of nowhere, angrily blaming Rex for the death of her sister. Rex continues to take a beating from Multipole, who's launching a vicious attack. Invincible rushes to Rex's aid, and during the chaos he starts slicing through Multipole's versions like paper. Just as the battle escalates, Kate and Immortal suddenly appear, intervening to stop the fight. Kate reveals that she survived. With the situation de-escalated, Mark informs Kate that her brother, Multipole, will be going to prison for his reckless actions. Oliver is studying with April when Debbie arrives home. She and April have a conversation about Oliver's accelerated growth, acknowledging how quickly he's maturing. Mark arrives shortly after, and his mom, Debbie, expresses how much she appreciates his presence. Afterward, Mark spends some time with Oliver, playing catch and talking about the recent events. Mark promises Oliver that he'll go crime fighting with him once Oliver gets his powers. To Mark's surprise, Oliver demonstrates his own emerging powers by flying, revealing that he's developing super abilities of his own. Rex enters the Guardians' headquarters, and his teammates are immediately shocked by the bruises and injuries he's sustained. Behind him, Kate and Immortal make a surprise entrance, causing an emotional stir among the team. The Guardians are overjoyed to see Kate alive, as her death had been a significant event in the series. Kate, however, drops a bombshell by revealing that she's engaged, catching everyone off guard. Cecil and Donald are investigating a series of environmental disasters, trying to piece together the cause and understand what's happening. During their investigation, Donald shows Cecil a recording of Oliver, revealing that he's now showcasing his powers.
You should have led with this.
Deborah expresses her concern to Mark about Oliver having powers, fearing the potential danger and responsibility that comes with them. Mark reassures her, telling her that he made Oliver promise not to use his powers for the time being. Mark is playing bowling with William and Rick when the conversation shifts to his relationship with Eve. Mark shares how he's been thinking about Eve, especially after a conversation with her future self, who told him that she loved him. William and Rick encourages Mark to pursue a relationship with Eve and see where it leads.
Say, Mark.
Mark floats outside Eve's house, trying to gather his thoughts about what to say to her. Meanwhile, inside, Debbie is helping Oliver cover up his purple skin with makeup, explaining that it's important to maintain his secret identity. Just as they're finishing up, there's a knock at the door. Oliver answers it, and to his surprise, it's Cecil standing on the other side. Eve starts talking to Mark about her plans to go to college, and they share a quiet conversation about their future. As the conversation progresses, Mark finally gathers the courage to ask Eve if she would go out with him, expressing his feelings and taking a leap of vulnerability.
Are you asking me out?
Yeah.
Debbie tells Cecil that she had no prior knowledge of Oliver's powers, making it clear that she wasn't hiding anything intentionally. Cecil responds by saying he would have appreciated being informed. Debbie, however, points out that he found out anyway, and reminding him that she doesn't work for him, asserting her independence. Cecil, maintaining his composed but authoritative stance, reminds Debbie that they were supposed to trust each other, and that both Mark and Oliver are part of something much bigger than just her family. However, Debbie stands her ground, making it clear that, above all else, her priority is her family. Doc Seismic appears to be meditating in his prison cell, sitting in complete stillness as if preparing for something ominous. Meanwhile, Rex is in the shower when suddenly the water pressure drops, and thick black goo starts pouring from the shower head instead. Shocked and disgusted, Rex quickly gets out, trying to figure out what's happening. As he walks through the dimly lit facility, unaware of the danger lurking below, a massive hole in the ground opens up beneath him. From the darkness, a monstrous creature emerges, grabbing Rex and pulling him into the depths. Donald is urgently informed that intense geological events are occurring across the country, causing widespread destruction. Adding to the crisis, all superheroes are mysteriously unaccounted for. As the gravity of the situation sinks in, the camera shifts to Doc Seismic's prison cell, only to reveal that he's gone, leaving behind a hole in the ground where he once sat meditating. Meanwhile, Debbie confronts Cecil about Oliver being taken to a lab for testing. She firmly states that she cannot agree to it, despite Cecil's attempts to reason with her. She makes it clear that she refuses to trust her son's life in his hands, drawing a definitive line between them. Before the conversation can escalate further, Cecil receives a critical phone call. His expression darkens as he turns to Debbie and delivers chilling news. Every superhero has been abducted, except for 2.
Okay,
Okay?
sure. Let's try.
Eve agrees to go out with Mark, smiling as she acknowledges that they have so much in common. Mark, clearly happy, expresses his excitement and then tells Eve about the future version of herself who confessed her love for him. Eve becomes visibly upset. She argues that the future version of her isn't her, and begins venting her frustration, feeling like Mark is putting expectations on her based on someone she never was. The conversation quickly turns into a tense exchange. Before things escalate further, Mark's phone rings. It's Cecil, delivering urgent news. He and Eve are the only superheroes left. The gravity of the situation cuts through their argument, shifting Eve's focus. Still frustrated, she warns Mark that this better be important. Oliver carefully tries to sneak out of the house, but Debbie discovers him. Doc Seismic looms over the captured heroes, smugly watching as they struggle within their containment. Reinforced bubble cells. Despite their best efforts, every attempt to break free proves useless, as the cells absorb their attacks. Seismic taunts them, reveling in their helplessness, making it clear that he's in complete control.
You are all dust, and to dust you shall return!
Just then, Mark and Eve arrive at the scene, immediately assessing the dire situation. Before they can act, Doc Seismic smirks and raises his hands, summoning terrifying, monstrous creatures from beneath the earth. As the battle unfolds, Cecil and Donald watch the chaos through surveillance monitors, their expressions tense. They observe as Mark and Eve struggle against Doc Seismic's monstrous creations. Cecil, clearly unsettled, questions how Doc Seismic is capable of orchestrating something on this scale. Without hesitation, Cecil turns to Donald and gives a decisive order to open up the dark room. Oliver finally opens up to Debbie, explaining why he wanted to leave. Debbie listens patiently, then gently reminds him that if he wants to do something important, he needs to talk to her first instead of sneaking around. Then with a small smile, she tells him something that instantly brightens his mood. She's Invincible's mom, and she'll ask Mark to train him. Oliver's eyes widen in excitement. Unable to contain himself, he lifts off the ground and starts flying around in pure joy. As the battle rages on, Invincible and Eve struggle to fight off Doc Seismic's monstrous creations. Mark relentlessly punches the creatures, but no matter how hard he hits, they barely flinch. With a smug grin, Seismic reminds him that his creations are indestructible. Mark quickly tells Eve to focus on freeing the imprisoned heroes while he holds off the monsters. Eve nods and moves toward the bubble cells, but before she can act, Seismic unleashes a devastating shockwave, sending her crashing hard into the ground. Seeing Eve injured, Mark rushes to help her, but before he can reach her, one of the creatures lunges forward and buries its massive fangs into his chest. Mark screams in pain, blood dripping from the wound. Gritting his teeth, he rips himself free. But the agony leaves him disoriented. His vision blurs, his movements sluggish. Seismic, seeing his opportunity, strides forward confidently. Before Mark can react, Seismic delivers a crushing blow, knocking Invincible out cold.
Invincible! Wake up!
As Mark regains consciousness, he immediately turns to Eve, shaking her gently and calling her name in a worried tone. She remains unresponsive, and panic sets in. Just as Doc Seismic prepares to finish them off, Darkwing 2 suddenly strikes from the shadows, momentarily distracting him. Before Seismic can retaliate, large capsules crash down from the sky, opening up to reveal Cecil's cyborg warriors. They immediately begin freeing the imprisoned heroes, turning the tide of battle. Seizing the opportunity, Darkwing 2 engages Seismic in close combat, forcing him to summon even more monstrous creatures to defend himself. With their strength restored, the heroes charge into battle, taking on Seismic's monsters with renewed determination. Meanwhile, Mark is finally freed, but in his injured and angered state, he brutally tears apart one of the cyborgs. Despite this, the cyborgs continue assisting the heroes in fighting back against Seismic's forces. Realizing he's losing, Seismic attempts a final devastating attack to wipe everyone out. But Darkwing 2 intervenes, luring the creatures away to prevent further destruction. With their combined efforts, the heroes emerge victorious, cheering as the battle finally comes to an end. As the dust settles, Darkwing 2 restrains Seismic and begins addressing the heroes. But before he can finish, Invincible tackles him to the ground, cutting him off. The heroes are stunned as Mark angrily reveals that Darkwing is a murderer and that the cyborgs are creations of a dangerous and unethical man. Surprisingly, Darkwing doesn't deny it. Instead, he solemnly agrees and apologizes, acknowledging the darkness of his past actions. Mark, still filled with doubt, begins questioning Cecil's loyalty, but Immortal steps in, demanding that he stand down, reminding him that they saved their lives today. Still unconvinced, Mark takes off into the sky, determined to confront Cecil directly.
He's coming.
Mark storms into Cecil's headquarters, furious over what he just witnessed. He immediately starts confronting Cecil, demanding answers about Darkwing 2 and the cyborgs. Cecil, remaining calm, explains that he reconditioned them so they could still be useful in protecting the world.
Mistakes? They murdered people!
Mark's anger flares as he argues that they should be in prison. Cecil, unfazed, tells Mark that he's doing what's necessary to save lives, even if it means making difficult choices. But Mark isn't convinced. He refuses to back down, declaring that he won't leave until both Darkwing and Sinclair are locked away for good. Sighing, Cecil steps into the White Room, with Mark following closely behind. Mark asks about the mystery of the room. Before Cecil can answer, cyborgs suddenly materialize. In the Viltrumite prison, Alan expresses frustration over the poor food, lamenting that despite the Viltrumites' greatness, their prison meals are disappointing. Omni-Man comments that the Viltrumites usually kill their enemies. Omni-Man suggests that Alan could escape due to his strength, but Alan refuses to leave without him. Omni-Man, with a sense of urgency, insists Alan should leave before the Viltrumites kill him. Alan defies him and remains seated. Suddenly, Alan is taken to a room and a blast of energy strikes Alan. To Omni-Man's shock, Alan survives the blast, still alive and defiant, surprising Omni-Man with his resilience and strength. A young Cecil enters a store, handing a weapon to intimidate the customers, sending them into a panic and forcing them to flee. He then makes his way to the back of the store, where he discovers a closet filled with reactive chemicals. As he investigates, a woman suddenly attacks, slamming his head into the glass and throwing him to the floor.
You found us. But you found us too late.
She tells Cecil that while he may have found them, no one is coming to save him, and the two begin to fight. The woman quickly gains the upper hand, overpowering Cecil. He tries to understand her motives and asks why she wants to kill thousands of people. She responds that the survivors will learn that life is a gift, and she plans to revolutionize the world. As the fight rages on, Cecil finally uses a shockwave to knock the woman down. But as he tries to deactivate the chemicals, he's suddenly grabbed by a strong hand. A man, more powerful than the woman, begins pummeling Cecil, landing blow after blow. The woman cheers him on, praising his strength.
We'll never stop the order of the freeing fist!
However, their fight is cut short as police alarms blare in the distance, startling the duo. They hesitate, but the woman and man walk toward the chemicals, activating the bomb. The explosion disintegrates them instantly, but not before Cecil pushes them into the chemical room, holding the door shut to contain the blast. Cecil is also caught in the blast, suffering severe burns. Emergency help arrives soon after, trying to save Cecil, but it's clear that he has narrowly escaped death. Now fully healed, Cecil sits in a hospital room, his expression serious as he asks his partner how many people died in the explosion. His partner, with a grim face, responds, 17. His partner asks him why did he left the scar on his face, a permanent reminder of the battle. Cecil responds quietly, explaining that the scar is a reminder to himself so that he never makes the same mistakes again.
It's a reminder that I messed up.
In a tense moment, Cecil holds his bleeding partner, desperate to save him. Just as a massive villain appears ready to attack, Cecil's previous enemies intervene to help. However, Cecil shoots them in the head, declaring that he doesn't work with criminals.
I don't work with criminals.
Cecil ends up in prison, surrounded by intimidating inmates and a menacing giant as his cellmate. Over time, he rises to become the leader of all the prisoners. One day, Redcliffe visits and offers Cecil the role of director, explaining that the prison was meant to rehabilitate him. Cecil is given the choice to either take the job or stay, but he refuses. Redcliffe then gives him an ultimatum: you can be the good guy, or the guy who saves the world. No both.
Protection from what?
Mark is confused by Cecil's security cyborgs, and when Cecil warns him not to escalate things, Mark insists he only uses his powers for good. Cecil argues that Mark threatens those who oppose him, and admits he's starting to fear him. When Mark tries to approach, the cyborgs attack, but Mark destroys them effortlessly. Cecil reveals he has more cyborgs ready, but Mark demands he admit to his actions. As Mark threatens him, Cecil activates a device implanted in Mark's brain, causing him intense pain and forcing him to stop.
We are so far past reasonable.
Mark attempts to fly away, but Cecil keeps paralyzing him, causing him to crash to the ground. In disbelief, Mark confronts Cecil, asking if he implanted a weapon inside him, to which Cecil confirms. He explains that after Mark's father, he couldn't take the risk. Mark then reminds Cecil that he said he wasn't like his father, and Cecil reluctantly agrees. However, before the conversation can continue, Mark quickly flies away, determined to get out of the situation. The heroes, exhausted after Doc Seismic's attack, try to regain some normalcy when Mark suddenly arrives in a panic, begging Rudy to remove a device implanted in his head before Cecil finds him. Cecil arrives, trying to calm the situation, but Mark refuses to go with him, exposing Cecil's alliances with known murderers. When Bulletproof questions him, Cecil asserts his authority, insisting this isn't a democracy. Mark resists, leading to a chaotic battle against Cecil's forces. The fight escalates, with Rex intervening, but a device malfunction causes a disaster. Enraged, Cecil calls Mark a hypocrite for helping his murderous father while condemning others. Mark severs ties with Cecil and the GDA, delivering a final warning.
And if you ever come near my family again, I will kill you.
The scene ends with Mark demanding the device's removal, solidifying his break from Cecil's control and setting the stage for further conflict. Mark, Eve, his mother, and his younger brother process their betrayal by Cecil in a tense conversation. Mark's mother reassures him, but he struggles with the realization that Cecil is now another monster they must fight. He admits to threatening Cecil, but clarifies that his family does not kill. Oliver, eager to help, questions why Mark didn't eliminate the threat entirely. Mark insists on protecting Oliver's childhood, urging him to be patient and not rush into violence. Mark realizes Cecil feared what he could become, leading to his betrayal. Eve reassures Mark that he isn't a killer, though he admits he unintentionally took Angstrom's life. She comforts him, saying he's better off without Cecil's influence. Their conversation shifts to their relationship. Mark appreciates Eve's support, and she admits she was worried about him. However, she is unsettled by a future version of herself who was heartbroken over him for decades. Mark confesses he had feelings for Eve since they met, but buried them due to her relationship with Rex and later Amber. Despite this, Eve remains unsure, saying a high school crush isn't enough for a real relationship. She needs time to think. The scene ends with Eve reaffirming her loyalty to Mark, though for now, friendship must be enough. The discussion begins with frustration over having to clean up the aftermath of a battle instead of a specialized team handling it. This leads to questioning their treatment under Cecil, with some realizing they are viewed as expendable weapons. Tensions escalate when the group debates Mark's recent conflict with Cecil. Some argue that Mark brought the attack on himself, while others defend him, blaming Cecil's excessive measures, including planting a bomb in Mark's head. The argument intensifies between team members with accusations of hypocrisy and betrayal. Some believe the Guardians should remain united despite hardships, while others see Cecil's actions as a breaking point. Eventually, several members decide to quit, refusing to work for someone they no longer trust. Immortal, the team leader, warns that those leaving have 2 hours before they are forcibly removed. Mark admits he thought they had stopped Sinclair, only to learn that the government enabled him instead. He wonders if he should have done more, implying that he regrets not taking extreme measures to permanently stop Sinclair. Rick, who was one of Sinclair's victims, struggles with the injustice of the situation, acknowledging that Sinclair hurt and killed many people. However, Rick reassures Mark that killing Sinclair would have made him just like the villain himself. He reminds Mark that the world doesn't need more people like Sinclair. It needs heroes like Invincible, reinforcing Mark's moral stance and the weight of his choices as a hero. The members of the Guardians are seen leaving with their belongings after deciding to quit due to their distrust of Cecil. Girl takes a moment to speak with Robot, admitting that when she first joined the Guardians, she never truly believed she would make it, and for a while, it didn't feel real to her. However, she realizes that the most genuine part of her time with the team wasn't the organization itself, but the people she worked alongside. She then expresses gratitude that Robot is leaving with them, showing that she values his presence and friendship. Robot, in his usual logical and detached manner, responds that his decision was purely based on reason and the circumstances, but the moment highlights the bond between them.
Just tell the girl you're leaving for her.
Robot and Black Samson share a brief but meaningful conversation as the Guardians split up. Black Samson offers advice, likely about Monster Girl and Robot's connection. Robot implies that his motivations aren't just personal, but also strategic, pointing out that Invincible is the most powerful superhero on the planet. Acknowledging that having Invincible on his side could be important in the future. Samson, recognizing Robot's calculating mindset, calls him a cold fish, but ultimately expresses that he will miss him. Debbie and Paul have dinner, but Debbie's lingering trauma makes the date uneasy. Paul tries to lighten the mood, joking about her not calling him back. Debbie admits fear kept her from going out after a gas explosion. Paul shifts the conversation to Mark, assuming he's just a typical young adult. Debbie vaguely responds, hinting at Mark's complex life, leading to a misunderstanding about special needs. She struggles to explain, then apologizes for being out of practice with dating. Paul reassures her, offering an easy way out, and the scene ends with mutual understanding. Eve arrives at her architecture class, signaling a fresh start as she explores a career beyond superhero work. The professor introduces Introduction to Architectural Form, highlighting the fundamentals of construction and the importance of stability and protection. This scene highlights a turning point for the Guardians of the Globe as they rebuild after losing members. Cecil acknowledges the situation, while reassures that backup is available and new recruits can be found. He then suggests reinstating Darkwing, despite Invincible's opposition. Darkwing admits his past mistakes but expresses a sincere desire for redemption. Cecil remains silent, but Immortal accepts Darkwing back, emphasizing themes of second chances and the team's resilience. Cecil reveals his exhaustion and pragmatism when discussing Darkwing's controversial reinstatement. Donald hesitantly brings up Darkwing's past crimes in Midnight City, arguing that calling him in during an emergency was one thing, but making him a guardian is another. Cecil, weary but firm, responds that people change, villains can reform, and heroes can lose sight of their purpose. Cecil reflects on his first day as director of the Global Defense Agency, GDA. Donald Ferguson, his number one, introduces him to the team. However,
I'm looking forward to working with you.
Cecil quickly becomes aware of the complacency in the agency, noting that the reports are outdated and filled with lazy edits. As the conversation shifts, the team is alerted to an unidentified, powerful individual, and Donald suggests sending in the Immortal first, as per protocol. However, Cecil, cautious and strategic, insists they don't know the person's intentions yet, and doesn't want to send the Immortal to potentially escalate the situation with force. Omni-Man is effortlessly destroying a creature when Cecil approaches him. Omni-Man defiantly asks who Cecil is, and Cecil calmly introduces himself as the new director of the GDA. Omni-Man then presents himself and his intentions, with a tone of confidence and dominance. The GDA team discusses Omni-Man's true intentions after his meeting with Cecil. While they acknowledge that Omni-Man might not be human, they are skeptical of his claims about the World Betterment Committee, dismissing it as unrealistic. Despite the doubts, Cecil decides to allow Omni-Man to assist for now, as long as he helps save lives. However, He orders the team to track Omni-Man's movements. Donald brings Cecil back to the present moment, interrupting his thoughts. Cecil reassures him that Darkwing will be fine, telling Donald to let it go. When Donald brings up Invincible, Cecil responds suggesting that they have the option to either be the good guys or the ones who save the world. Mark and Eve have an emotional conversation about their feelings for each other. Mark opens up, acknowledging that while Eve might think being friends or supporting him is enough for now, it's not enough for him. He admits that when he was attacked by Cecil and thought he might die, the only thing that mattered to him was the thought of never seeing Eve again. He confesses that his feelings for her are deep and genuine, not just a crush, and that it's always been real for him. Eve listens carefully, and Mark expresses his vulnerability, admitting that he was slow to realize his feelings. He offers her the chance to reject him if she doesn't feel the same, but if she does, he wants to try being together. Eve responds positively, confirming that she feels the same way and that they can give it a shot.
So are we dating or what?
The scene ends with them acknowledging they are now dating, and they share an intimate kiss. Two unknown characters break into a bank, terrifying the customers and causing chaos. Just as they are about to access the vault, Bulletproof intervenes, forcefully throwing them out and making them flee. Back at their apartment, they argue over their failed heist. Realizing they need money, they attempt to live honestly by working at a restaurant. However, they soon face another setback when their rent increases, forcing them to look for better-paying jobs, without success. They continue working at the restaurant, but when one of them tries using their powers to cook meat, they accidentally burn it. Their boss angrily scolds them, and in frustration, one of them yells back, leading to their firing. With nowhere to turn, they eat a meal but are soon evicted from their apartment. Now desperate and furious, they revert to crime, attempting to rob another bank. Just as they are about to escape, Invincible arrives, setting up a confrontation that will determine their fate. Invincible fights the robbers but is briefly captured, and just as he's about to be hit with a lava punch, Oliver appears and knocks the robber down. Invincible gets free and rushes to Oliver, but they are both captured. However, when the robber realizes Oliver is just a kid, he hesitates, giving Invincible the chance to land a powerful punch that sends him crashing into a wall. Mark then argues with Oliver about his reckless involvement, but Oliver insists he only wanted to help. Frustrated, Mark tells him they need to leave.
Am I in trouble?
Back at home, Debbie scolds him and sends him to his room, frustrated that he flew inside the house. She expresses concern about Oliver's growing powers and the dangers that come with them. Mark acknowledges her worries but argues that asking Oliver not to use his abilities is unrealistic, reminding her that she agreed he would train him. Debbie insists that Oliver is too young and that she wants him to have as normal a childhood as possible. Mark reassures her that he'll be careful, ensuring Oliver doesn't get hurt or hurt others. Eve discusses her architecture class with Helen, revealing that she enjoys applying what she learns. Their conversation is interrupted when Eve reconnects with Amber while discussing her architecture studies, explaining that she's learning to better use her powers. Over coffee, Amber updates Eve on Mark rescuing Debbie and Oliver in his fallout with Cecil. When the conversation turns to Mark and Eve's relationship, Amber reveals she already knows and assures Eve she's happy for them. She acknowledges that her own relationship with Mark didn't work due to their different worlds, while Eve expresses how natural and exciting her relationship with him feels. Amber then hints at a new romantic interest, Kyle, strengthening the bond between the two friends. The team arrives at their new headquarters, which, while not extravagant, is still a functional base. Robot clarifies that the property is legally his, but Rex optimistically sees its potential as both a home and a future investment. Rex reverts to his old joking personality with an inappropriate remark, but quickly catches himself, showing his ongoing efforts to mature. He then envisions fixing up the place, turning it into a prime crime fighting base, and invites the others on a tour, setting the stage for their new chapter as a team. Rex helps Ray find a room, reminiscing about his past while she admires the team's experiences. Ray shares how her parents trained her strictly as a hero, while Rex reveals his own tragic past, being sold to the government and experimented on. Despite their hardships, Rex downplays the pain, but Ray acknowledges the uniqueness of their struggles, emphasizing their shared trauma. Eve shares that her spare apartment is no longer available and declines Robot's offer to stay with them, as well as Rex's suggestion to rejoin the team. She expresses surprise over Kate staying with the Guardians, especially since she's marrying the Immortal. Eve reveals she's moving back in with her parents to repair their relationship, and Rex teases her, implying it's also to be closer to Mark. Eve responds molested, calling him a jerk. Mr. Liu confronts Titan, expressing frustration that his best assassin is imprisoned in an American jail while Titan does nothing to resolve the situation. Titan responds indifferently, stating that it's not his problem. Mr. Liu reminds Titan that by taking over Machine Head's empire, Titan has inherited the responsibilities of the Order, including dealing with issues like this. Titan firmly rejects the idea, insisting he only cares about controlling the city and wants nothing to do with the Order's affairs.
Boss? A word?
Isotope urges Titan to comply with the Order's demands, highlighting that even Machine Head had to bend to their authority. He warns Titan that refusal could lead to replacement, endangering him and his family. Despite his concerns about the consequences of freeing Multipol, Titan reluctantly agrees to handle the situation once, with the condition that he won't deal with the Order again. Isotope acknowledges Titan's decision, joking that he won't need to pass on the message to Leo. Oliver struggles to keep up with Mark's speed while flying, complaining about the unfairness. Mark encourages him to push harder, emphasizing that training will be tough. Oliver, eager to learn combat, mentions practicing fighting techniques online, but Mark insists they focus on flying first. He urges Oliver to keep up, though Oliver remains confused about where they're going. At Art's store, Oliver excitedly tries on his new suit and jokingly calls himself Kid Omni-Man. Mark warns him not to use his powers in public without permission, concerned that the name could remind people of their father's troubled past. While Oliver believes the name and symbol will showcase his own heroism, Mark explains it will take time for people to forgive his father. Art presents Mark with a new suit, and they hear about an attack at Peyton Penitentiary. Oliver is eager to join and try out their new suits, but Mark insists he won't fight. As they leave, Art reflects that Oliver reminds him of a past kid he knew.
Reminds me of another kid I knew.
Kursk and Furnace are dominating the prison guards when Mark and Oliver arrive. Mark explains the villain's powers and tells Oliver to stay back, following the rules about their public personas. Oliver jokes about his name but disobeys Mark, jumping into the fight and getting in danger. Mark rescues him, reprimands him for not listening, and warns him not to act recklessly again. Oliver apologizes, acknowledging his mistake.
I told you to just watch. You almost got yourself killed.
Debbie and Paul are on a date, enjoying wine tasting, where Debbie reveals her knowledge came from her past with Nolan, a travel writer. Paul expresses his insecurities about their relationship, unsure if Debbie was ready to date again. Debbie reassures him and opens up about Nolan's true identity, admitting he wasn't a travel writer and isn't dead, and that the events in Chicago involved Nolan and Mark, with the new kid being from another planet. Shocked, Paul feels inadequate. But Debbie comforts him, praising his intelligence, kindness, and hair, showing she values him for who he is. Eve confronts her parents about her powers and their impact on their relationship. She reflects on how her family used to pretend to be normal, but acknowledges that her powers have always been a part of her, and that they can't be ignored. She asks them to accept her for who she is, including her powers, and makes it clear that she won't stop using them to help others. Eve sets boundaries, asking her parents not to make her feel like a freak or a failure. Her father initially resists, but after some emotional discussion, he agrees to the terms. Eve then lightens the mood, asking if she can move back in for a while. Mark and Oliver come home and are surprised to find Debbie kissing her boyfriend Paul. Debbie awkwardly introduces him, while Mark tries to cover up their recent battle by saying they were at a comic book store opening. Oliver, however, makes things uncomfortable by bluntly asking if Debbie and Paul are going to mate. Paul shifts the conversation by pointing out that the boys are on the news. Oliver is excited, but Mark realizes the person on TV isn't them. Paul assures them he can keep their secret.
You're Invincible now?
Eve and Mark discuss their challenges. Eve shares that her talk with her parents went well, as she set boundaries and reached an agreement. She also mentions seeing Amber at college, who is doing well. Mark, exhausted, vents about his tough day, getting new suits from Art, Oliver recklessly joining a dangerous fight, and discovering that his mom told her boyfriend his secret identity. Feeling overwhelmed, he wonders how he can juggle all his responsibilities without disappointing everyone. Eve reassures him that his loved ones are also there to support him. She jokingly calls him Invincible, and reveals she saved a clip of the news segment, much to Mark's dismay. Nate and Tanya are discussing their surroundings, with Tanya expressing unease about the place. She explains her fear, referencing her traumatic experience with the Lizard League tunneling into the base and the gruesome aftermath. Nate tries to calm her by saying that lightning doesn't strike the same place twice, but Tanya disagrees, pointing out that his analogy doesn't fit the situation.
That was easier than I thought.
The Maulers easily break into the facility. They notice new enemies and criticize the design of a piece of equipment. One of them is warned not to be careless, as nukes don't detonate from impact but can still cause harm. As they prepare for confrontation, the enemies are approaching. The Guardians of the Globe break into the facility, demanding the Maulers surrender.
And now I say something.
However, the Maulers taunt them, expressing disbelief that the team would try to stop them without backup, and insulted by the fact that the Maulers wanted to eliminate the entire team. A fierce battle ensues, with the Guardians quickly being overwhelmed. The Maulers fire at them, paralyzing several of the heroes, including Immortal, who attempts an attack but is thrown back with immense force. Darkwing tries to save Shapesmith from a blast, while Duplicate uses all her powers to assist, but she too is paralyzed. Immortal tries again for a second round, but with Darkwing struggling to help, the Guardians are ultimately defeated. Debbie informs Mark that the Guardians need assistance, while the Maulers debate whether to execute the heroes and strategize their plan for world domination. Suddenly, Mark arrives, but the Maulers fail to recognize him due to his new suit. Meanwhile, Oliver, searching for Mark, sees the news and rushes to join the fight. Mark struggles to resist being paralyzed but ultimately succumbs to an electric shock, weakening him. Just as he is about to be struck again, Oliver arrives and destroys the weapon. He lands a powerful punch on the Maulers, prompting Mark to question why he is there. The Maulers retaliate, restraining Mark and striking Oliver in the face. Mark quickly rescues his brother and orders him to retreat. As the Maulers launch their rocket, Mark pursues it at full speed. Meanwhile, Oliver, refusing to stand down, lands a devastating punch that crushes one Mauler's face. However, the other Mauler grabs him and slams him into the ground. Mark manages to catch up to the rocket and destroys it with a powerful blow. At the same time, Oliver viciously attacks the remaining Mauler, killing him instantly by tearing his head apart. The Guardians, witnessing the brutality, are visibly disturbed. Cecil arrives and tries to console Olive. Mark returns to the base, where Oliver attempts to explain that he didn't intend to kill them. But Mark, enraged, grabs Cecil by the neck. However, he releases him upon seeing Oliver covered in blood. Mark then takes Oliver and flies away, confronting him about his actions. Their conversation escalates into an argument, with Oliver insisting that life holds no real value, echoing Omni-Man's ideology. Mark is left stunned by his brother's words.
Do you ever think that maybe Dad was right?
Mark meets with Eve and apologizes for being late, but she reassures him that she understands. He expresses his appreciation for her and begins recounting the recent events, including how Oliver killed their enemies. Sensing his distress, Eve comforts Mark by reminding him that Oliver is still young and doesn't fully understand his powers or the consequences of his actions. As they share a hug, Mark brings up his frustration about his mother revealing his secret. However, Eve helps him realize that Debbie likely needed someone to confide in. After some reflection, Mark acknowledges her point and agrees. Mark approaches his mother, and she tells him that she plans to talk to Oliver. They then begin washing the dishes together, sharing a quiet but meaningful moment. During this time, Mark takes the opportunity to express that he forgives her, and now understands why she shared his secret. Debbie has a heartfelt conversation with Oliver about his views on life and morality. She challenges his belief that life isn't precious by asking if he would care about her death, to which he responds that he loves her and wouldn't want to lose her. She then explains that everyone has loved ones who would grieve for them, regardless of whether he knows them personally. Oliver reflects on this, realizing that even those without family still matter. He promises not to make the same mistake again, assuring Debbie of his sincerity, and they share an emotional embrace. Mark suddenly notices a floating camera spying on them. Realizing they are being watched, he quickly exits the room and destroys the device. The impact triggers an explosion, raising immediate concerns about who was behind the surveillance and what their intentions might be. The footage from the destroyed camera is revealed, showing recordings of Mark, including the moment he destroys the device and surveillance from previous days. As the feed continues, the camera zooms out, revealing a shadowy figure seated in a chair, intently watching the recordings. Their identity and motives remain unknown,